And before I really start, I feel I owe myself an apology, if not you. I have spent my entire academic life not talking about Freud. When I was young, I was a bit of a masochist. I read his complete works. And I didn't mind the one about jokes, and I quite liked the pleasure principle. But beyond that, to say I was underwhelmed, I'm afraid would be an exaggeration towards whelming. I wasn't remotely whelmed. There was nothing that I felt that was new. It was all a farrago of romantic and ancient medicine. A world in which Galen himself would have been perfectly happy. And it has all been said better and more insightful by the other philosophers. Now, the piece I'm going to do today, I could do using Spinoza or Hume or even Leibniz, but I'd have to explain the scaffolding to you. And a little video essay would end up taking half an hour to take you through the format of each philosopher. I can do it much quicker this way. Freud, then, taking it from who cares where, argued very sensibly that big emotions are somehow so powerful, so worrying, so threatening, that for whatever reason, they're very difficult to express. We tend to rather mythologicalize them, move them out into 1,000 smaller emotions, or parables, or allegories. We feel this love and not that love, because that love is too dangerous and too difficult. We hate them because we loathed our father. We love them because they remind us of our mother. Emotions, then, particularly fears and furies that are too powerful, too all-encompassing, that threaten our very existence, can never be felt for what they are, but rather must be expressed elsewhere. This central truth has become, of course, the great secret of advertising. What you do with advertising is you prey on people's insecurities about themselves. You make them feel really scared about themselves, and then you give them some way to mitigate the God that has been raised, of fear that has been raised from the depths of their soul. We're going to come back to advertising in a minute. But this idea, then, that big emotions are difficult to express, is surely the only way we can understand the current shibboleths, the current fears, the current conspiracies that stalk a world and make it almost a parody world. And so I tire of the people who tell me the government is controlling the weather. And I sit there thinking, well, if the government controlling the weather, they ain't doing a very good job of it. France is far too hot and then far too cold. Macron wouldn't like this climate. But the fear, of course, is global warming. Our weather is slipping beyond all control because of humanity. And that is such a scary idea. Such an unthinkable idea. Far better to assume the government is somehow in control. There's a them that if only you could find would be all right. To say it's classic Freudian repression goes against my soul, but it is. Or again, it is absolutely true that the politics and economics that has been pursued since the oil crisis and the collapse of Keynesian economics has destroyed our society. We've gone back to that model of rampant capitalism that gets called neoliberalism, but for another video essay I'll explain why I loathe that term. That model, then, has ripped through societies, create incredible inequality. It has no logic but the death, in fact, of all society, and its replacement by some sort of plutarchy. Its proponents said as much. It creates, then, disorder and dissension, as sure as breathing. And yet, to attack it is somehow to attack all our wealths, for we're all bound up within that drama. And as long as you're not the very poorest, and the very poorest do not live in the West, you're always all caught in its guilt. Far easier, then, to blame the dissension the fury, that feeling of inadequacy that it creates, that inner anger at the destruction of society on the poorest, or those not there, or those who are sometimes other, who can become then the living totem for this fury. I mean, of course, immigration. What is the fear of the immigrant but the fear of the society in which we live, the society that is already falling apart? They become blamed then for what we are caught in creating, the very destruction of our souls that we are such party of. Or again, there is a very worrying truth about the connection between chemical industries and food businesses. The two go hand in hand. Or to put it simply, modern food makes you ill, and drug companies cure that illness. But drug companies also sold the fertilizer that made you ill in the first place. Your body then becomes yet another profit ground in which pharmaceuticals and food and agribusiness have their play, make money, as they make you unwell and then well and then unwell again and again in a never-ending cycle. This is genuinely scary, far too scary. So far better to understand that in terms of something else that condemns the pharmaceutical business. Vaccines then, which codifies that fear in a way that is somehow much more understandable, gettable too, that is more immediate. Just ban vaccines and burn the doctors. And so in all this endless repression, what endlessly shoots the messenger? Scientists become rogues, be they working for pharmaceutical companies or just those experts who break their hearts every day as they try to wrap their heads around why we are going to let ourselves burn ourselves and boil ourselves to death. It all becomes just, all such messages become unthinkable. Now, this would probably happen without the help of others. But of course, since Freud's son-in-law, Bernays, perfected the art of selling cigarettes as a health gimmick to nervous Americans worrying about their status, using his brother-in-law's theories, advertising and capitalism have gone hand in hand. And an understanding of the fears of humanity. And so it was that rich foundations really in America, and this is the conspiracy theory, you'll say, oh, you do believe in one. Well, they say they do it, and they do. They use slogans, they use things like immigration to move the blame for our current situation from them onto others. They've been doing it for 100 years. They'll do it until we stop them. These transliterations then are not innocent. They don't come from nowhere, or even they don't even come from our subconscious, desperate to hide ourselves from the truth. Oh no, they might have happened anyway. But what they are is partly controlled by those who would use the dysfunctions they cause for power and influence. Freud then, I think, offers the only way to easily and quickly understand the great terror of our time, the way it is being gathered in its own Greek tragedy. A Greek tragedy where none of us can speak the name of the terrors that stalk us, and are sentenced as Oedipus ever to run from them, only to find them anew in other ever more fearful spaces. And until we accept that, we are not going to move on at all.